Lieutenant Edward Powell's fingers trembled as he manipulated the alien control panel, acutely aware that humanity's fate hung in the balance. The bioluminescent glow of the Wadi Central Command Center cast an eerie blue light across his face, highlighting the beads of sweat forming on his brow. He had mere minutes to implement his unorthodox plan, a plan that hinged on the most unexpected of weapons, human manual pleasure techniques. The events leading to this moment had unfolded rapidly since the United Earth Federation starship Intrepid stumbled upon the Wadi civilization during a routine survey of an uncharted planet. Initial contact had been promising, with the telepathic, technologically advanced aliens welcoming the human explorers with open arms. Powell, assigned as the lead engineer for the diplomatic mission, found himself working closely with Gia, a striking Wadi scientist whose intellect matched her otherworldly beauty. As they collaborated, exchanging scientific knowledge, Powell marveled at the Wadi's incredible biotechnology. Their achievements far surpassed anything humanity had developed. However, his admiration soon turned to dread when he uncovered the Wadi leadership's true intentions. They viewed humans as an inferior species, ripe for subjugation, and planned to launch a stealth invasion of Earth within days. The revelation shattered Powell's world. He found himself torn between his growing attraction to Gia and his duty to protect humanity. When Gia, equally conflicted, confided in him about the impending invasion, Powell knew he had to act. Drawing on his engineering background, he formulated a daring plan to exploit a weakness in Wadi physiology, their hypersensitivity to certain types of physical stimulation. Now, as he stood in the heart of the Wadi Command Center, Powell's mind raced. He had to incapacitate key Wadi leaders using specialized manual pleasure techniques, disrupting their invasion plans without alerting their telepathic security forces. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity's survival depended on the most intimate of human skills. Powell's fingers danced across the alien interface, inputting commands to override the security protocols. His heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the countless hours spent studying Wadi biology, perfecting his technique on the practice dummies he'd cobbled together in secret. He prayed it would be enough. A soft rustle behind him made Powell freeze. He turned slowly, fearing discovery, only to find Gia standing in the doorway. Her bioluminescent skin pulsed with a mix of fear and determination. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. In that moment, Powell realized the stakes had risen even higher. It wasn't just about saving humanity anymore. It was about forging a bridge between two species, proving that connection and pleasure could overcome prejudice and aggression. As alarms began to blare through the command center, Powell steeled himself for what lay ahead. He had mere moments to master the Wadi's unique biology, prevent an interstellar war, and perhaps even win the heart of an alien girl who couldn't resist his human touch. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, hands steady and mind-focused. The fate of two worlds rested in his uniquely skilled fingers. Powell's eyes locked with Gia's, their silent exchange conveying more than words ever could. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and she slipped into the room, closing the door behind her. "We don't have much time," Gia whispered, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with urgency. "The invasion plans have been accelerated. Earth will be under attack in less than 24 hours. Powell's stomach dropped. "Then we need to move faster," he replied, his voice low and determined. "I have a plan, but I'll need your help." As alarms continued to blare, Powell quickly outlined his strategy to Gia. He described the devices he had constructed, small, undetectable units designed to emit frequencies that would overwhelm Wadi's sensory systems without causing permanent harm. Gia's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "Clever," she murmured, "but risky. We'll need to plant them throughout the command center without being detected." "Exactly," Powell agreed. "Can you guide me through the layout and security protocols?" For the next hour, they worked in tandem, Gia's intimate knowledge of the facility complementing Powell's technical expertise. As they moved through the shadowy corridors, planting devices at strategic points, Powell couldn't help but marvel at Gia's grace and intelligence. Her presence both calmed and invigorated him, sharpening his focus on the task at hand. As they worked, Powell explained the finer points of his plan. These devices are based on my studies of Wadi physiology, but I'm concerned they might not be precise enough. To maximize their effectiveness, I need to refine my understanding of how your species responds to certain stimuli. Gia's skin flickered with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. What are you suggesting? Powell took a deep breath. I need to conduct an experiment on you, using the manual techniques I've developed. Gia's luminescence intensified, casting a brighter glow in the dim corridor. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. If it will help prevent this war, I'm willing. They found a secluded alcove, away from the main pathways. Powell's heart raced as he gently placed his hands on Gia's shoulders. Tell me everything you feel, he instructed softly. As Powell began to apply his techniques, the response was immediate and intense. Gia's skin pulsed with waves of light, her breath coming in short gasps. Powell watched in fascination, carefully noting every reaction, every subtle change in her bioluminescence. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. As Powell's skilled fingers worked, he found himself drawn deeper into Gia's alien yet captivating presence. For her part, Gia experienced sensations she had never known possible, her mind blown from the onslaught of pleasure. When it was over, they stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Powell quickly jotted down his observations, his mind racing with new ideas to refine his devices. That was illuminating, Gia finally said, her voice slightly shaky. Powell nodded, unable to fully meet her gaze. Thank you. This data will be invaluable. As they resumed their mission, both were acutely aware of the shift in their relationship. The shared experience had forged a deeper connection, one that transcended their differences as species. Their progress through the command center was swift but cautious. Powell's engineering background proved crucial as they bypassed security systems and concealed their tracks. However, as they neared the central hub, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. Security patrols have increased, Gia whispered, pulling Powell into a shadowy recess as a group of guards passed by. They must suspect something. Powell's mind raced, quickly adapting their plan. We'll need to split up, he decided. I'll finish planting the devices. You create a distraction to draw the guards away. Gia nodded, her expression a mix of drive and concern. Be careful, she said softly, before slipping away into the labyrinth of corridors. Alone now, Powell moved with renewed urgency. He placed the final devices with precision, each one a silent promise of Earth's salvation. As he worked, he could hear distant commotion, Gia's distraction in action. Just as he finished, Powell's communicator vibrated. A message from Gia flashed across the screen. Emergency briefing called. All leaders attending. I've been summoned too. What now? Powell's breath caught in his throat. This was their chance to incapacitate the entire Wadi leadership at once. But Gia would be caught in the crossfire. He had mere minutes to decide. Activate the devices and potentially harm Gia, or abort the mission and leave Earth defenseless. As he stood at the threshold of the briefing room, hand hovering over the activation switch, Powell realized that the fate of two worlds now rested on his next move. The clock ticked relentlessly towards Earth's darkest hour, and Lieutenant Edward Powell prepared to make a decision that would echo across the stars. Powell's hand hovered over the activation switch, his mind racing. He couldn't risk harming Gia, but the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Time seemed to slow as he weighed his options, acutely aware of each passing second. Suddenly, an idea struck him. With practiced efficiency, he began modifying the devices, his fingers working with precision born from years of engineering experience. He quickly crafted a small, inconspicuous earpiece, designed to shield Gia from the effects of the sensory assault. Gia, he whispered into his communicator, I have a plan, but I need you to trust me. Can you meet me near the briefing room entrance? Moments later, Gia appeared, her luminescence dimmed with concern. Powell handed her the earpiece, explaining its purpose in hushed tones. This will protect you from the effects. I've modified the devices for remote activation. You'll be our eyes and ears inside. Gia's skin pulsed with a mix of fear and perseverance as she inserted the earpiece. "I understand. Be careful, Edward." As Gia entered the briefing room, Powell slipped into a nearby maintenance corridor. He pulled out a datapad, linking it to the command center's security feeds. The screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the briefing room. High Commander Zorn stood at the front, his imposing figure dominating the space. "The human infestation will be eradicated," Zorn's voice crackled through the feed. "Our invasion fleet stands ready." Powell's eyes hardened as he watched the Wadi leaders nod in agreement. His finger hovered over the activation button on his datapad. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. With a swift motion, Powell activated the devices. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Zorn stumbled mid-sentence, his words dissolving into a garbled moan. Around the room, Wadi leaders collapsed or swayed, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of sensations. Through the camera feed, Powell watched as Gia masterfully feigned the same symptoms, her acting so convincing he almost feared the earpiece had malfunctioned. She stumbled towards a computer terminal, her movements disguised as uncontrolled spasms. Gia's fingers flew across the alien interface, initiating a system-wide shutdown of the invasion fleet. Alarms blared throughout the command center as ships powered down and launch bays sealed. Powell allowed himself a moment of triumph, but it was short-lived. A group of Wadi officers burst into the corridor, their bioluminescence pulsing with alarm. Powell pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding. As the officers passed, Powell moved swiftly through the shadows, making his way towards the central control room. He rounded a corner and found himself face-to-face with a Wadi security patrol. Without hesitation, Powell sprang into action. He ducked under the first guard's swing, using the Wadi's momentum to throw him off balance. In a fluid motion, he swept the legs out from under the second guard, sending him crashing to the floor. The third guard charged, but Powell was ready. He sidestepped, grabbing the Wadi's arm and using a joint lock to immobilize him. The guard's bioluminescence flared with pain as Powell applied pressure, forcing him to the ground. The skirmish was over in seconds, but the commotion had drawn attention. More alarms sounded, and Powell could hear the heavy footsteps of reinforcements approaching. He sprinted down the corridor, his mind racing. He needed to reach Gia and complete the mission, but the entire command center was now on high alert. Suddenly, a door slid open beside him, and a hand pulled him inside. Powell tensed, ready to fight, but found himself face-to-face with a young Wadi female. "I'm Lyra," she whispered, her luminescence dim with caution. "I want to help. What the High Command is doing, it's wrong." Powell hesitated, uncertain whether to trust her. But time was running out, and he needed all the help he could get. "I need to reach the central control room," he said. Lyra nodded, her fingers dancing across a nearby console. "I can give you access codes to bypass the security checkpoints. But hurry, Zorn has ordered the execution of anyone suspected of sabotage." Powell's blood ran cold. "Gia," he breathed. With renewed urgency, Powell raced through the command center, using Lyra's codes to slip past security barriers. He could hear the chaos unfolding around him, confused shouts, orders being barked, the heavy thud of Wadi soldiers searching for intruders. As he neared the central control room, Powell activated another of his sensory devices, incapacitating a group of guards blocking his path. He vaulted over their writhing forms, his focus entirely on reaching Gia. The doors to the central control room loomed before him. Inside, he could see Gia surrounded by a group of suspicious Wadi officers, their luminescence pulsing with anger and suspicion. Powell's hand tightened on the last of his devices. He had one chance to save Gia and complete the mission. The fate of two civilizations rested on what he did next. Taking a deep breath, Powell prepared to make his final move. The doors began to slide open, and he tensed, ready to leap into action. The moment had come to determine the future of both humanity and the Wadi. Wadi! The moment stretched like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Powell's fingers tightened on the device, his breath caught in his throat. Then, in a blur of motion, he burst through the doors. The scene before him unfolded in vivid detail. Gia stood surrounded by a group of Wadi officers, their bioluminescence pulsing with angry, suspicious hues. Their attention snapped to Powell as he entered, giving Gia the split second she needed. With lightning speed, she ducked low, sweeping her leg in a graceful arc that sent two officers stumbling. Powell didn't hesitate. He activated the device, filling the room with a piercing frequency that sent the remaining Wadi to their knees, clutching their heads in agony. "Gia!" Powell called out, his voice barely audible over the chaos. She looked up, relief flooding her features as she saw the earpiece still securely in place. "We need to move!" she shouted, already sprinting towards him. Zorn's ordered an evacuation. They're heading for the secure bunker. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The sound of heavy footsteps and shouted orders echoed from the corridors beyond. Powell nodded, his mind racing. "We need to get to the central control room. Can you guide us there?" Gia's skin flickered with commitment. "Follow me." They dashed into the hallway, immediately encountering a squad of Wadi guards. Powell's military training kicked in. He ducked under a swinging arm, using the alien's momentum to flip him over his shoulder. Beside him, Gia moved with fluid grace, her knowledge of Wadi physiology allowing her to target pressure points with devastating efficiency. As they fought, Powell couldn't help but marvel at their teamwork. Human and Wadi moving in perfect synchronization, their strengths complementing each other in ways neither could have anticipated. The skirmish drew attention. More guards poured into the corridor, their weapons trained on the unlikely pair. Powell reached for another of his devices, but Gia's hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait," she said, her eyes fixed on something behind the approaching guards. "Look." A young Wadi female stepped out from behind a control panel, her luminescence dim with caution. "I'm Lyra," she called out. "I want to help." Before Powell could respond, Lyra's fingers flew across the nearby console. Suddenly, the corridor was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the confused, pulsing bioluminescence of the Wadi guards. "This way," Lyra's voice guided them through the chaos. Powell felt Gia's hand grasp his, pulling him forward. They ran blindly, trusting Lyra's directions as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the command center. As they ran, Gia's voice came low and urgent in Powell's ear. "I can use my access to initiate a communication blackout. It'll hinder their ability to coordinate, but it'll cut us off from Lyra too." Powell weighed the options quickly. "Do it," he decided. With a nod, Gia tapped a sequence into her wrist device. Instantly, the distant shouts and orders faded to silence. The only sounds were their own heavy breathing and the thud of their footsteps on the metallic floor. They emerged from the darkness into a brightly lit area. Powell blinked, his eyes adjusting to see they were in a large, open space filled with blinking consoles and holographic displays. The central control room. A handful of lower-ranking Wadi technicians looked up in surprise. Powell didn't give them time to react. He raised the sensory device, activating it with practiced ease. The Wadi crumpled to the floor, overcome by the assault on their senses. As Powell secured the room, Gia moved to the main computer terminal. Her fingers danced across the alien interface, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm shutting down their weapons platforms and shield generators," she explained, her voice tight with focus. "But Edward, Zorn's activating emergency protocols. He's preparing ships for immediate launch." Powell's blood ran cold. If Zorn escaped, he could regroup with other Wadi forces and continue the invasion plans. Everything they had fought for would be for nothing. He joined Gia at the terminal, his engineering expertise allowing him to quickly grasp the alien technology. Together, they worked to lock down launch bays and disable critical systems. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled through the communication system. "Powell? Gia, can you hear me?" "Lyra?" Powell responded, surprised. "Yes, I've bypassed the communication blackout. Listen, I can guide you to Zorn's location, but you need to hurry. He's almost reached the secure bunker." Powell and Gia exchanged a look. This was their chance to end the invasion threat once and for all, but it would mean leaving the relative safety of the control room and venturing back into the chaos of the command center. "We're in," Powell said, his voice firm. "Guide us." As they prepared to leave, Powell noticed a weapons rack near the entrance. He grabbed a Wadi energy weapon, quickly familiarizing himself with its alien design. With Lyra's voice in their ears and tenacity in their hearts, Powell and Gia stepped out into the corridor. The fate of two worlds rested on their shoulders as they raced to confront High Commander Zorn and prevent his escape. The command center had descended into chaos. Alarms blared, emergency lights flashed, and the air was thick with tension. As they navigated the twisting corridors, they encountered pockets of resistance, confused and angry Wadi soldiers trying to make sense of the situation. Powell's newly acquired Wadi weapon proved invaluable. Its unfamiliar weight balanced perfectly in his hands as he fired precise, stunning blasts. Each encounter forced him to adapt, combining his Earth combat training with the alien technology in ways that caught the Wadi off guard. Gia moved like a shadow at his side, her intimate knowledge of Wadi physiology allowing her to incapacitate opponents with swift, precise strikes. Their teamwork was seamless, each anticipating the other's moves as if they had fought side by side for years. As they pressed forward, guided by Lyra's steady voice, Powell couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Here, in the heart of an alien stronghold, humanity's adaptability and resourcefulness were on full display. The Wadi had gravely underestimated what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. Suddenly, Lyra's voice crackled with urgency. "Powell, Gia, listen carefully. Zorn has reached the secure bunker. He's initiating launch sequences for his escape shuttle. You have minutes at most to reach him before he's gone." Powell's eyebrows furrowed. They were so close. He turned to Gia, seeing his own perseverance reflected in her alien eyes. "We can't let him escape," Gia said, her voice low and intense. "If he gets away with the invasion plans—" Powell nodded grimly. "Then we better run." They sprinted through the final corridors, their footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. As they rounded the last corner, they saw it, the massive, reinforced doors of the secure bunker, and beyond them, the faint rumble of engines warming up. Time was running out. Earth's fate hung in the balance as Powell and Gia prepared for their final push. The escape shuttle's engines grew louder, a countdown to either victory or devastating defeat. With one last shared look of grit, they charged forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond those formidable doors. Doors. The escape shuttle's engines grew louder, a countdown to either victory or devastating defeat. With one last shared look of purpose, they charged forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond those formidable barriers. Powell slammed his shoulder into the doors, using his full body weight to force them open. The metal groaned and gave way, revealing the vast expanse of the shuttle launch bay. The sight before them was chaotic. Wadi security forces scrambled to secure the area, their bioluminescence flashing urgent patterns in the dim light. At the far end of the bay, a sleek shuttle hummed with energy, its engines warming up for imminent takeoff. High Commander Zorn was mere moments away from escape. "We need to move now," Powell shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of the launch preparations. As they sprinted across the bay, a group of Wadi guards spotted them. The aliens moved to intercept, their weapons raised. Powell's combat training kicked in instantly. He ducked under a swing from the first guard, using the alien's momentum to throw him off balance. In a fluid motion, Powell swept the legs out from under a second guard, sending him crashing to the ground. Beside him, Gia moved with grace and precision. Her intimate knowledge of Wadi physiology allowed her to target pressure points with devastating efficiency. She struck one guard in the side, causing his bioluminescence to flare with pain as he collapsed. Powell found himself marveling at their teamwork even as he fought, human and Wadi moving in perfect synchronization, their strengths complementing each other in ways neither could have anticipated. As more guards poured into the bay, Powell reached for his last remaining sensory device. He activated it, filling the air with a piercing frequency that sent several Wadi to their knees, clutching their heads in agony. Gia, meanwhile, had made her way to a nearby control panel. Her fingers flew across the alien interface, hacking into the security systems. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the bay, and emergency lights began flashing erratically. The remaining guards looked around in confusion, momentarily distracted by the chaos. Taking advantage of the distraction, Powell and Gia pushed forward. They were so close now, the shuttle loomed before them, its engines reaching a fever pitch. But as they approached, Powell's heart sank. The launch sequence had already begun. They wouldn't reach it in time. His mind raced, searching for a solution. Then he spotted it, a maintenance access panel near the launch pad. Recognition flashed in his eyes as he identified it as part of the fuel delivery system. "Gia, cover me!" he shouted, sprinting towards the panel. As Gia engaged the remaining guards, Powell reached the access panel. His fingers moved with practiced ease, his engineering expertise allowing him to quickly grasp the alien technology. He rerouted fuel lines, creating a sudden pressure drop in the shuttle's propulsion system. The effect was immediate. Alarms blared from the shuttle as its engines sputtered and died. The emergency shutdown sequence engaged, trapping the craft on the launch pad. For a moment, silence fell over the bay. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics, the shuttle's hatch opened. High Commander Zorn emerged, his bioluminescence pulsing with fury. In his hands, he wielded an advanced Wadi weapon, its design unlike anything Powell had seen before. Zorn's eyes locked onto Powell and Gia, who now stood side by side at the base of the launch pad. The High Commander's voice boomed across the bay, filled with contempt. "You dare to interfere with my plans?" Zorn snarled. "Your primitive species is no match for Wadi superiority. I will prove it once and for all." To Powell's surprise, Zorn tossed aside his weapon. "Face me in single combat, human," he challenged. "Let us settle this as warriors." Powell hesitated, his mind racing. He glanced at Gia, saw the concern in her alien eyes. But he also recognized the opportunity this presented. If he could defeat Zorn here and now, it might end the conflict without further bloodshed. "I accept your challenge," Powell called back, his voice steady. As he stepped forward to face Zorn, Powell's mind was already analyzing, strategizing. He recalled his earlier experiments with Gia, the subtle differences in Wadi physiology he had observed. He remembered their hypersensitivity to certain types of physical contact. Zorn descended from the shuttle, his bioluminescence pulsing with confidence. The two began to circle each other, each studying their opponent. Powell knew he was at a physical disadvantage. Wadi were naturally stronger and more agile than humans, but he had other advantages. Zorn struck first, his movements blindingly fast. Powell barely managed to dodge, feeling the wind from the alien's fist as it passed inches from his face. He countered with a series of quick jabs, testing Zorn's defenses and reactions. The High Commander was skilled, easily blocking or evading Powell's attacks. But as the fight progressed, Powell began to incorporate techniques from various human martial arts, moves Zorn had never encountered before. The alien's confident expression slowly gave way to one of confusion and frustration. Powell saw his opening. He feinted left, then struck with lightning speed at a specific nerve cluster he had identified in Wadi anatomy. Zorn's eyes widened in shock as an intense, overwhelming sensation coursed through his body. Pressing his advantage, Powell continued his assault, targeting pressure points and nerve clusters with precision. Each strike sent waves of disorienting sensations through Zorn's nervous system, similar to the effects of Powell's devices, but more focused and powerful. Zorn fought back furiously, but his movements became erratic and uncoordinated. He was unprepared for the way his own body was betraying him, overwhelmed by sensations he couldn't comprehend. As the battle reached its climax, Powell saw his chance. He ducked under Zorn's wild swing and applied pressure to a specific point on the alien's neck. The effect was immediate. Zorn's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground, incapacitated but unharmed. But alive. Powell stood over the fallen High Commander, his chest heaving from exertion. The bay fell silent, save for the hum of machinery and the distant alarms. Gia approached, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and concern. "Edward, that was incredible. I've never seen anyone best Zorn in combat before." Powell nodded, still catching his breath. "It's not over yet. We need to secure him and contact Earth's representatives." As they moved to restrain Zorn, Lyra's voice crackled through their communication devices. "Powell, Gia, can you hear me? We have a situation developing." "Go ahead, Lyra," Powell responded, his brow furrowing. "A group of Wadi militants loyal to Zorn have seized control of a secondary command center. They're led by subcommander Krell, one of Zorn's closest allies." Powell and Gia exchanged worried glances. The victory they had just achieved suddenly felt hollow. "We need to move quickly," Gia said, her voice tight with urgency. "If Krell rallies Zorn's supporters, we could lose everything we've fought for." Powell nodded, his mind already racing through potential strategies. "Lyra, can you guide us to this secondary command center?" "Affirmative," Lyra replied. "I'm sending you the schematics now. But be careful. Krell's forces have control over most of the security systems in that sector." As they prepared to leave, Powell noticed Gia's demeanor change. Her bioluminescence pulsed with a pattern he hadn't seen before, a mix of anxiety and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Gia, are you all right?" he asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. She turned to him, her alien eyes meeting his. "Edward, this might be our last moment of calm before we face Krell. There's something I need to tell you." Powell felt a sudden shift in the air between them. The chaos around them seemed to fade away as Gia stepped closer. "Working with you, fighting alongside you, it's shown me a side of humans I never knew existed. Your adaptability, your courage, your capacity for connection." Her voice softened. "I've come to care for you, Edward, more than I thought possible." Powell's heart raced. He had felt the growing bond between them, but hearing Gia express it so openly caught him off guard. In that moment, the differences between their species seemed to melt away. Acting on instinct, Powell gently placed his hand on Gia's face, careful to avoid the sensitive areas he had learned about during their earlier interactions. He felt a slight tingle as her bioluminescence reacted to his touch. "Gia, he began, but words failed him. Instead, he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture that bridged their two cultures. The moment was interrupted by another urgent call from Lyra. "Powell, Gia, Krell's forces are mobilizing. You need to move now." Reality crashed back in. They broke apart, but the connection between them remained, stronger than ever. "Let's finish this," Powell said, his voice filled with newfound grit. They made their way through the Wadi complex, following Lyra's directions. The maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts provided cover from Krell's patrols, but navigating them required all of their combined skills. As they approached the secondary command center, they overheard a conversation that made their blood run cold. "The seismic device is primed, subcommander," a Wadi voice reported. "We can trigger tectonic instability on Earth at your command." Krill's voice followed, filled with cold willpower. "Excellent. This will force the Wadi leadership to see reason. The invasion must proceed as planned." Powell and Gia shared a look of horror. The stakes had just risen exponentially. "We need to split up," Powell whispered. "I'll go after the seismic device. You disable their communication systems." Gia nodded, her expression a mix of concern and dedication. "Be careful, Edward." They parted ways, each acutely aware of the danger they faced and the fragile connection they had forged. Powell made his way towards the weapons storage area, his mind racing through possible ways to disable the seismic device. As he rounded a corner, he came face to face with a group of Wadi guards. Time seemed to slow as Powell's combat training kicked in. He ducked under the first guard's swing, using the alien's momentum to throw him off balance. In a fluid motion, he struck at the pressure points he had learned from Gia, incapacitating two more guards before they could raise an alarm. The last guard managed to activate his communication device, but Powell tackled him, using a grappling technique that worked on the Wadi's unique physiology. The guard's bioluminescence flared erratically as he lost consciousness. Heart pounding, Powell entered the weapons storage area. The seismic device stood before him, a menacing piece of technology that could bring devastation to Earth. He approached it cautiously, studying its alien design. As he began to work on disabling the device, he heard a commotion in the distance. Gia must have reached the command center. He redoubled his efforts, knowing that time was running out. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Powell's hands moved faster, disconnecting power couplings and rerouting critical systems. Just as he removed the final component, rendering the device inert, the door to the storage area burst open. Subcommander Krell stood in the doorway, flanked by his elite guards. His bioluminescence pulsed with fury as he took in the scene before him. "You!" Krell snarled, recognizing Powell. You've ruined everything. Powell stood his ground, the disabled seismic device behind him. He could hear the sounds of chaos spreading through the facility, Gia's work disrupting the militant systems. As Krell advanced, weapon raised, Powell prepared himself for the fight of his life. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and he knew that the next few moments would determine the future of human-Wadi relations. The air crackled with tension as Powell and Krell faced each other, two warriors from different worlds, each fighting for what they believed was right. The final confrontation was about to begin, and its outcome would reshape the course of history for both their species. Species! Powell's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. Krell's elite guards raised their weapons, ready to fire at their commander's order. But before anyone could act, Krell activated a device on his wrist. A shimmering field of energy enveloped him, distorting the air around his body. A personal force field, Powell muttered, his mind racing to adapt to this unexpected development. He had never encountered such technology before, and it nullified his close combat advantage. Krell's bioluminescence pulsed with smug satisfaction. You see, human, Wadi technology is far beyond your primitive understanding. Surrender now, and I may show mercy. Powell's gaze darted around the weapon storage area, searching for anything he could use. His eyes landed on a container labeled in Wadi script, recognizing it as experimental pheromones from his earlier research. As Krell monologued about Wadi superiority, Powell inched towards the container. In one swift motion, he grabbed it and smashed it on the ground. A thick, invisible cloud billowed out, filling the air with potent Wadi pheromones. The effect on Krell was immediate. His force field flickered as he staggered, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of sensory input. The guards, similarly affected, lowered their weapons as they struggled to maintain focus. Powell seized the opportunity, launching himself at Krell. He combined human martial arts with the sensory manipulation techniques he had refined during his experiments with Gia. His fingers found Wadi pressure points, sending waves of intense sensation through Krell's body. The subcommander's force field sputtered and failed as he fought to regain control. Powell pressed his advantage, targeting the most sensitive areas of Wadi physiology. Each precise strike elicited involuntary pulses of bioluminescence from Krell. As they grappled, Powell heard the sounds of combat from the corridor. Gia's voice rang out, accompanied by the thuds of bodies hitting the floor. Moments later, she burst into the weapon storage area, her eyes widening at the scene before her. Krell, distracted by Gia's arrival, left himself open. Powell executed a final series of movements, his hands moving in a blur as he stimulated key nerve clusters. Krell's eyes rolled back, his bioluminescence flaring erratically before he collapsed in a heap of sensory overload. Powell stood over the incapacitated subcommander, his chest heaving. He turned to Gia, noting the signs of her recent battle, disheveled clothing and a few minor injuries. "Are you all right?" he asked, moving to her side. Gia nodded, her eyes fixed on Krell's prone form. "I've never seen anyone take down Krell like that. Your techniques, they were unlike anything I've ever witnessed." Powell allowed himself a small smile. "A combination of human ingenuity and Wadi physiology. We make quite a team." They quickly secured Krell and his guards, using restraints designed to counteract Wadi's strength. Powell retrieved the disabled seismic device and the data files detailing Zorn's invasion plans. As they worked, Gia's virus continued to spread through the facility's systems. Lights flickered, and the hum of machinery stuttered intermittently. Powell accessed a nearby terminal, using the chaos to override the communication systems. "This is Lieutenant Edward Powell," he broadcast throughout the facility into the orbiting ships. "Subcommander Krell has been apprehended. The coup attempt has failed. I request an immediate conference with the moderate Wadi leaders and Earth representatives." Responses flooded in almost instantly. The moderate Wadi, emboldened by the militants' defeat, quickly agreed. Earth's representatives, eager to capitalize on this turn of events, also accepted. As Powell and Gia prepared to leave for the impromptu diplomatic summit, they found themselves alone in the weapons storage area. The adrenaline of combat still coursed through their bodies, and the air between them felt charged with unspoken tension. Gia stepped closer to Powell, her bioluminescence pulsing with a pattern he now recognized as affection and desire. "Edward," she began, her voice low, "what we've accomplished here, it's unprecedented." Powell nodded, acutely aware of her proximity. "We've opened the door to real cooperation between our species, but there's still so much work to be done." Their eyes met, and for a moment the impending diplomatic negotiations faded into the background. Powell's hand moved to Gia's face, mimicking the gesture they had shared earlier. The tingle of her bioluminescence against his skin sent a shiver down his spine. Just as they leaned towards each other, a urgent communication chime shattered the moment. "Lieutenant Powell, Ambassador Gia," a voice crackled. "Your presence is required immediately in the main conference room." Reality crashed back in. They stepped apart, but the connection between them remained palpable. "We should go," Gia said, her voice tinged with reluctance. Powell nodded, gathering the seized evidence. "Together," he replied, the word carrying more weight than just their immediate plans. As they made their way through the facility's corridors, they discussed strategies for the upcoming negotiations. Powell's mind raced with the implications of their discoveries and the potential for a new era of human-Wadi relations. "We need to present a united front," Gia said as they approached the conference room. "Our partnership could be the key to bridging the gap between our species." Powell agreed, his hand tightening on the case containing the disabled seismic device. "We'll need to be careful. There will be hardliners on both sides looking for any reason to derail peace talks." They paused outside the conference room doors, the muffled sounds of heated discussion audible from within. Powell and Gia exchanged a look, silently acknowledging the challenges that lay ahead. "Ready?" Powell asked, his hand hovering over the door control. Gia's bioluminescence pulsed with tenacity. "Ready." The doors slid open, revealing a room filled with tense faces, human and Wadi alike. All eyes turned to Powell and Gia as they entered, carrying with them the future of interspecies relations. As they stepped forward to present their evidence and begin negotiations, Powell felt a mix of apprehension and hope. The next few hours would be crucial in shaping the future of both their worlds. With Gia by his side, he prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The doors slid open, revealing a scene that neither Powell nor Gia could have anticipated. The conference room was packed with a diverse array of beings. Human and Wadi representatives stood in tense clusters, their attention fixed on an unexpected group of newcomers. Towering over both species were tall, crystalline figures that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Powell's hand tightened on the case containing the disabled seismic device as he surveyed the room. Gia's bioluminescence flickered with surprise, her patterns shifting rapidly as she processed the new development. "Lieutenant Powell, Ambassador Gia," a human diplomat approached them, his voice low and urgent. "We have some unexpected guests." Before either could respond, one of the crystalline beings stepped forward. Its form seemed to ripple and shift as it moved, catching the light in mesmerizing patterns. "I am Ambassador Crix of the Zeltari," the being announced, its voice resonating with a strange musical quality. "We have been observing your species for some time, and we believe this moment of crisis presents a unique opportunity." Powell and Gia exchanged a quick glance, years of working together allowing them to communicate volumes in that brief moment. They moved further into the room, positioning themselves at the center of the gathering. "Ambassador Crix," Powell addressed the Zeltari leader, his voice steady despite the shock of their appearance. "I'm Lieutenant Edward Powell of Earth, and this is Ambassador Gia of the Wadi. We welcome you, but I must admit your arrival is unexpected." Crix's crystalline form shimmered, an effect that Powell interpreted as a nod. "We understand your surprise. The Zeltari have been monitoring both Earth and Wadi for decades. The potential we see in the combination of human ingenuity and Wadi biotechnology is extraordinary." As Crix spoke, Powell noticed the reactions rippling through the room. Some delegates leaned forward, intrigued by the possibility of new alliances. Others, particularly a group of human military officers led by a stern-faced general, regarded the Zeltari with open suspicion. Gia stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing in a pattern that Powell recognized as a sign of diplomacy and openness. Ambassador Crix, your presence here is certainly intriguing, but I must ask, what exactly are you proposing? The Zeltari ambassador's crystalline form seemed to brighten. We propose a three-way alliance, one that could revolutionize galactic exploration and scientific advancement. The Zeltari can offer advanced navigation and energy harnessing technologies that would complement your species' strengths. The room erupted into murmurs and heated discussions. Powell saw the human general he'd noticed earlier push his way to the front of the crowd. "This is General Hawthorne," a nearby aide whispered to Powell. "He leads the hardline faction of Earth's military." Hawthorne's face was set in a scowl as he addressed the room. "This is madness. We barely know anything about the Wadi, and now we're supposed to trust these living crystals? I say we use this opportunity to secure Wadi technology for Earth's defense. We can't risk being caught unprepared if the Zeltari turn out to be hostile." Several Wadi representatives bristled at Hawthorne's words, their bioluminescence flaring with anger. One of them, a high-ranking scientist judging by his insignia, spoke up. "And why should we share our biotechnology with a species that clearly doesn't trust us? We've already seen how humans might use it against us." Powell could see the situation rapidly deteriorating. The fragile peace they'd fought so hard to achieve was slipping away. He stepped into the center of the room, raising his voice to be heard over the growing chaos. "Everyone, please," he called out. The room gradually fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "I understand the concerns on all sides, but I believe we have an unprecedented opportunity here. Instead of focusing on our differences or potential threats, why don't we consider what we could achieve together?" He paused, looking around the room to ensure he had everyone's attention. "I propose a joint scientific mission. There's a nearby nebula, rich in rare elements, but too dangerous for any of our species to explore alone. If we combine our strengths, human adaptability, Wadi biotechnology, and Zeltari energy manipulation, we could unlock secrets that would benefit all of us." Gia's eyes lit up, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. She quickly picked up Powell's thread. "Yes, my team could develop a new type of bioengineered spacesuit, combining Wadi and human designs. It could withstand the extreme conditions of the nebula, allowing for extended exploration." Ambassador Crix's crystalline form seemed to vibrate with interest. "Fascinating. The Zeltari could contribute our energy-focusing abilities. Our bodies could amplify and channel the nebula's energy to power the expedition ships." The room buzzed with a new energy as delegates from all three species began to consider the possibilities. Even General Hawthorne looked thoughtful, though his expression remained guarded. Powell and Gia spent the next few hours moving through the crowd, addressing concerns and building support for their proposal. They worked in seamless tandem, their shared experiences allowing them to anticipate each other's arguments and provide mutual support. As the discussions continued, Powell found himself repeatedly glancing at Gia. Her passion and diplomacy shone through as she engaged with representatives from all three species. In quiet moments between conversations, their eyes would meet, and Powell felt a surge of connection that went beyond their professional partnership. Just as it seemed they were making headway, an alarm blared through the facility. The room's main display screen flickered to life, showing a tactical readout of the surrounding space. A fleet of unknown ships was rapidly approaching the planet. Confusion and fear rippled through the gathered delegates. Powell saw General Hawthorne's hand move to his sidearm, while several Wadi representatives huddled together, their bioluminescence flashing in urgent patterns. Ambassador Crix stepped forward, its crystalline form pulsing with a soft light. "This is unexpected. The Zeltari have no knowledge of these ships." Powell locked eyes with Gia across the room. In that moment, they both knew that the true test of their fledgling alliance was about to begin. As the unknown fleet drew closer, the future of three species hung in the balance, their ability to work together about to be put to the ultimate test. As the unknown fleet drew closer, the future of three species hung in the balance, their ability to work together about to be put to the ultimate test. The facility's alarm continued to blare as Powell, Gia, and Ambassador Crix rushed towards the command center. Delegates from all three species followed in their wake, a cacophony of voices rising above the din of the alarm. Upon entering the command center, Powell's eyes immediately locked onto the main tactical display. The unknown ships were arranged in a formation he had never seen before, their design unlike anything in Earth's database. "What are we dealing with?" Powell asked, his voice cutting through the chaos. A human technician at one of the consoles looked up, her face pale. "Sir, we've managed to establish communications with the approaching fleet. They identify themselves as the Vorax." As if on cue, the main screen flickered to life, revealing a nightmarish visage. The Vorax commander was an insectoid being, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under harsh lights. Multiple compound eyes focused on the assembled group, mandibles clicking in what Powell assumed was amusement or anticipation. Sentience of Earth, Wadi, and Zeltari. The Vorax commander's voice grated through the speakers, a mechanical translation giving its words an even more alien quality. "Your concentration of advanced technology has drawn our attention. Surrender your resources and knowledge, or face annihilation." The command center erupted into panic. General Hawthorne pushed his way to the front, his face contorted with rage. "We need to launch a preemptive strike now." Powell raised his hand, silencing the room. His mind raced, analyzing the situation. They were outgunned and unprepared, but they had one advantage: the combined strength of three unique species. "No," Powell said firmly. "We don't strike first. We defend." He turned to address the room. "This is the moment we've been talking about. Human, Wadi, Zeltari. We each bring something unique to the table. Together, we can repel this threat." Gia stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing with grit. "The Wadi can provide bio-enhanced weaponry. We have prototypes that could be quickly adapted to your ships." Ambassador Crix's crystalline form shimmered. "The Zeltari can construct a planetary shield using our energy-focusing technology. It won't be complete, but it should offer some protection." Powell nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "General Hawthorne, we'll need Earth's most advanced spacecraft. Gia, can your scientists develop some form of adaptive armor? And Ambassador Crix, how quickly can you get that shield operational?" As the others moved to carry out their tasks, Powell turned back to the main screen. The Vorax commander still waited, mandibles twitching impatiently. "Vorax commander," Powell addressed the alien, his voice steady. "We reject your demands. This planet and its people are under our protection. Retreat now, or face the consequences of your aggression." The Vorax commander's multifaceted eyes seemed to glitter with malice. "You have made your choice, humans. Prepare for extermination." The screen went dark, and Powell turned to face his newly formed alliance. "We don't have much time. Let's get to work." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Powell coordinated with Earth's military, overseeing the deployment of their most advanced ships, now equipped with Wadi bioweapons. Gia led her team in developing a revolutionary form of living armor, capable of adapting to Vorax attacks in real time. Ambassador Crix directed the construction of the planetary shield, the air humming with crystalline energy. As the Vorax fleet entered the solar system, Powell stood in the command center, surrounded by representatives from all three species. The tactical display showed the approaching enemy ships, their numbers far greater than initially estimated. "This is it," Powell said, his voice carrying across the tense silence. "Remember, we're stronger together. Trust in each other, and we'll make it through this." The first wave of Vorax ships streaked towards the planet, their weapons lighting up the void of space. Earth's defense fleet moved to intercept, their hulls gleaming with the bio-enhanced armor developed by Gia's team. Powell watched as the battle unfolded, issuing orders and coordinating between the three species' forces. The Vorax weapons were devastating, but the combined technologies of the Alliance were holding their own. Wadi bioweapons latched onto Vorax ships, disrupting their systems. Zeltari energy beams sliced through enemy formations, creating openings for human pilots to exploit. On the planet's surface, Gia oversaw the deployment of the adaptive armor to ground troops and civilian shelters. The Vorax bombardment was intense, but casualties were significantly reduced thanks to the quickly evolving protection. As the battle raged on, Powell's keen tactical mind spotted a weakness in the Vorax fleet formation. It was a small opening, but if exploited correctly, it could turn the tide of the entire conflict. "I need a ship," Powell announced, his decision made. "A small, fast craft with the best of our combined technology. I'm going to lead a team right into the heart of their fleet." Gia's eyes widened, her bioluminescence flickering with concern. "Edward, that's incredibly dangerous." Powell met her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. "It's our best chance. I need you here, coordinating the ground defenses and keeping me updated." As Powell prepared for the mission, Gia approached him with a small, pulsating device. "This is a biolink," she explained, her voice soft. "It will allow us to maintain constant communication. More than that, it will let us connect on a deeper level." Powell nodded, understanding the implications. As Gia attached the device to his temple, he felt a sudden rush of her emotions: concern, admiration, and something deeper, more intimate. With a final look at Gia, Powell boarded the specially modified craft. As they launched into the chaos of the space battle, he felt the biolink come alive, Gia's presence a comforting anchor in his mind. The small ship darted between massive Vorax vessels, relying on a combination of human stealth technology, Wadi biosensors, and Zeltari energy manipulation to avoid detection. Powell's hands danced over the controls, his mind melding with the ship's bio-enhanced systems in a way he had never experienced before. As they penetrated deeper into enemy territory, the Vorax finally detected their presence. Swarms of smaller craft converged on Powell's ship, their weapons fire filling space with deadly energy. In that moment of crisis, Powell drew upon his experiences with Wadi physiology, specifically the techniques he had refined during their earlier intimate encounters. He used this knowledge to interface more deeply with the ship's systems, achieving a level of control that bordered on the impossible. Through the biolink, he felt Gia's amazement and support. Her presence seemed to expand in his mind, their consciousness intertwining in a way that transcended physical boundaries. Together, they guided the ship through the Vorax defenses, their combined instincts and knowledge creating a synergy that no single pilot could match. As they approached the critical weak point in the Vorax fleet, Powell prepared to deploy their payload, a combination of Wadi bioweapons and Zeltari energy pulses. The timing had to be perfect. "Now, Edward," Gia's voice echoed in his mind, their shared awareness detecting the perfect moment. Powell triggered the release, watching as the weapons streaked towards their target. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in balance. Then a massive explosion rippled through the Vorax fleet, chain reactions taking out system after system. As the Vorax ships began to falter, Powell allowed himself a moment of hope, but the battle was a long way to go, and the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Vorax fleet was in disarray, but Powell knew the battle was just the beginning. "Gia, we've dealt them a significant blow," Powell communicated through their biolink. "How are things on the ground?" "The adaptive armor is holding," Gia's voice resonated in his mind, tinged with relief and perseverance. "Casualties are minimal, but Edward, there's a problem with the Zeltari shield. It's destabilizing under the continued bombardment." Powell's fists tight as he maneuvered the ship back towards the planet. "I'm on my way. We need to coordinate our efforts to push them back for good." As they approached the atmosphere, Powell felt a surge of shared purpose through the biolink. Human, Wadi, and Zeltari forces were working in concert, their combined strengths creating a formidable defense. The next few hours were a blur of tactical decisions, daring maneuvers, and moments of heart-stopping peril. Powell found himself alternating between the command center and the front lines, his unique blend of leadership and hands-on expertise proving invaluable. Finally, as the twin suns of the system began to rise, the last Vorax ship retreated. A cheer went up from the assembled forces, a cacophony of human voices, Wadi bioluminescent pulses, and Zeltari crystalline resonances. In the aftermath of the battle, Powell found himself standing with Gia and Ambassador Krix, overlooking the scarred but unconquered landscape. "We did it," Gia said, her voice filled with wonder. "We actually did it." Powell nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "We did, and we did it together." Ambassador Krix's crystalline form pulsed with what Powell had come to recognize as agreement. "This alliance has proven its worth. The Zeltari people are honored to stand with humans and Wadi. As the dust settled and the immediate threat passed, the focus quickly shifted to the future. The successful defense against the Vorax had demonstrated the potential of their alliance, but it had also highlighted the need for a more formalized structure. In the weeks that followed, Powell and Gia found themselves at the center of intense negotiations. Their pivotal roles in the recent crisis, combined with their unique understanding of interspecies cooperation, made them natural choices to lead the next phase of the alliance. The Joint Species Task Force, Powell mused, looking at the proposal before him. It's ambitious. Gia nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. It's necessary. We need a unified command structure if we're going to face threats like the Vorax in the future. As they worked to bring the JSTF to life, Powell and Gia's bond deepened. The shared experiences of the battle, combined with their continued use of the biolink, created a level of intimacy and understanding that transcended normal human relationships. The day the JSTF became operational, Powell and Gia stood side by side as they were officially appointed co-directors. The ceremony was a mix of human, Wadi, and Zeltari traditions, symbolizing the unique nature of their alliance. As they left the ceremony, Powell turned to Gia. Ready for our first assignment, Director? Gia's skin rippled with patterns of anticipation. The Nebula expedition. It seems fitting, doesn't it? To start where this all began. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation. The Harmony, their new ship, was a marvel of combined technologies. Powell spent countless hours in the engine room, marveling at the integration of human warp drives, Wadi bioengineered systems, and Zeltari energy manipulation technology. As the launch date approached, Powell was introduced to the latest addition to their crew. Dr. Lyra Voss strode into the briefing room, her confident demeanor immediately catching his attention. "Lieutenant Powell," she said, extending her hand, "I've heard so much about you. I'm looking forward to working together on this expedition." Powell shook her hand, noting the warmth in her gaze. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Voss. Your expertise in xenobiology will be invaluable." As Dr. Voss began to outline her research plans, Powell felt a subtle shift in Gia's bioluminescence. He glanced at his co-director, catching a flicker of what might have been concern in her expression. The day of launch arrived with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the Harmony broke free of the planet's atmosphere, Powell stood on the bridge, Gia at his side and Dr. Voss at a nearby console. "All systems operational," the human navigator reported. "Wadi biosupport functioning at optimal levels," Gia added, her hands dancing over the organic interface. "Zeltari energy drives stable and ready for nebula insertion." Ambassador Crix's voice came through the comms. Powell took a deep breath, feeling the weight of command. "All right, let's make history. Set course for the nebula, maximum safe speed." As the Harmony surged forward, the view screen filled with the swirling colors of the nebula. Powell felt a thrill of anticipation, tempered by the knowledge of the challenges that lay ahead. Barely an hour into their journey, the first signs of trouble appeared. A series of alarms blared through the ship, and the lights flickered ominously. "Report!" Powell barked, moving swiftly to the main engineering console. "We're experiencing power fluctuations across all systems," a Zeltari engineer responded, their crystalline form vibrating with concern. "The integration of our technologies is causing unexpected interactions." Powell's mind raced, analyzing the problem. He turned to Gia, their biolink humming with shared thoughts. "We need to stabilize the power grid. Can you use the Wadi biosystems to create a temporary buffer?" Gia nodded, her fingers already moving across her console. As she worked, Powell felt a hand on his arm. He turned to see Dr. Voss, her face etched with concern and something else. Admiration. "Impressive thinking, Lieutenant," she said, her voice low. "I may have a suggestion to complement your approach." As they worked to purpose the crisis, Powell found himself caught between Gia's familiar presence in his mind and Dr. Voss's intriguing insights. The ship stabilized, but Powell couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of their challenges. As they penetrated deeper into the nebula, the Harmony's sensors began to pick up unusual readings. Powell leaned forward, studying the data with growing excitement. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, glancing between Gia and Dr. Voss. Gia nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing rapidly. "An energy signature. Artificial in origin. And old," Dr. Voss added, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "Very, very old." As the Harmony approached the source of the signal, a massive structure began to take shape through the swirling gases of the nebula. Its architecture was like nothing Powell had ever seen, a blend of organic shapes and crystalline structures that seemed to defy conventional engineering. "A station," Powell breathed, awe evident in his voice. "An alien station, out here in the middle of nowhere." As they prepared for their first away mission to the mysterious station, Powell couldn't help but feel that they stood on the brink of a discovery that would change everything. The true test of their alliance and of his own leadership was about to begin. The true test of their alliance and of his own leadership was about to unfold. As the away team prepared for their expedition to the mysterious station, Dr. Voss approached Powell with an intriguing proposal. "Lieutenant, I've been analyzing the nebula's radiation patterns. I believe we can use controlled exposure to enhance our cognitive abilities and better interpret the alien data." Powell's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. "That's a risky move, Doctor. What are the potential side effects?" "Minimal, if we proceed carefully," Dr. Voss assured him. "I've developed a protocol to mitigate any dangers." Gia, overhearing their conversation, interjected with concern. "Edward, this sounds too dangerous. We don't know enough about this radiation to risk our crew's safety." Powell weighed the options, feeling the pressure of their mission's urgency. "We'll proceed with caution." Dr. Voss set up a volunteer group for initial testing. "Gia, I want you monitoring their vitals throughout the process." As Dr. Voss's plan was set into motion, Powell oversaw the procedure with a mix of anticipation and worry. The volunteers, a diverse group of humans, Wadi and Zeltari, were subjected to carefully controlled doses of nebula radiation. The effects were immediate and startling. Powell watched in amazement as the exposed crew members began processing and interpreting the alien data crystals at an unprecedented rate. Their eyes moved rapidly, absorbing information faster than seemed possible. "This is remarkable," Dr. Voss exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "They're making connections we never could have anticipated." From her separate lab, Gia monitored the volunteers' vital signs. Her bioluminescence pulsed with concern as she noticed subtle changes in their bioreadings. "Edward, I'm detecting some anomalies. Nothing critical yet, but we should proceed with caution." Despite Gia's reservations, the initial results were promising. The exposed crew members made rapid progress in deciphering the Wormhole device blueprints, their enhanced cognitive abilities, allowing them to bridge gaps in the alien technology with intuitive leaps. As work on the Wormhole device progressed, Powell's attention was drawn to a new threat. The ship's sensors detected an approaching vessel, rapidly closing in on their position. "All hands to battle stations," Powell ordered, his voice calm but authoritative. "Maintain defensive posture while we continue our research." As the unknown ship came within scanning range, Powell's heart sank. The vessel's design was unmistakably Vorax, but with significant modifications. It seemed their old enemies had been busy reverse engineering Alliance technology from their previous encounter. Tensions mounted on the bridge as the Vorax ship hailed them. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of a Vorax captain. "I am Zexkar of the Vorax Dominion," the alien's gravelly voice filled the bridge. "Surrender your discoveries from the ancient station or face annihilation." Powell stepped forward, drawing on his diplomatic experience. "Captain Zexkar, I'm Lieutenant Edward Powell of the Joint Species Task Force. We have no quarrel with you. Perhaps we can discuss this matter peacefully." As Powell engaged in tense negotiations with Zexkar, buying time for the research team, Dr. Voss burst onto the bridge. "Lieutenant, we've made a breakthrough. The Wormhole device, we think we can use it to create a localized spatial distortion." Powell's mind raced, seeing an opportunity to neutralize the Vorax threat without violence. However, operating the device safely required intimate knowledge of both human and Wadi physiology. With a heavy heart, Powell realized there was only one solution. He turned to Gia, their eyes meeting across the bridge. Gia, I know we've had our differences, but I need you. We're the only ones who can do this. Gia's bioluminescence flickered with conflicting emotions, but she nodded resolutely. For the sake of the mission, Edward, let's do this. As they made their way to the wormhole device, alarms blared throughout the ship. Dr. Voss's voice came over the comms, urgent and strained. The radiation effects are becoming unstable. The volunteers are showing signs of physiological stress. Powell and Gia exchanged a worried glance as they reached the device. They had to act fast. As they began calibrating the complex machinery, their movements fell into perfect synchronization. The familiar connection of the biolink hummed between them, strengthened by their shared focus in the high-stakes situation. Powell found himself drawing on his knowledge of Wadi physiology, using techniques he had refined during their previous intimate encounters to help Gia interface more effectively with the device's biocomponents. Their connection deepened, transcending the physical as they worked in perfect harmony. Just as the Vorax ship prepared to attack, Powell and Gia activated the wormhole device. A shimmering distortion formed around the enemy vessel, trapping it in a bubble of warped space-time. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms screamed throughout the harmony as the wormhole device began to overload, threatening to create an expanding distortion that could engulf both ships. In a split-second decision, Powell initiated an emergency shutdown sequence, requiring intense, prolonged contact with the device's control interface. As he held the connection, his senses were overwhelmed by a flood of data and energy, pushing his human physiology to its limits. Gia, recognizing the danger, sprang into action. She applied specialized Wadi pressure techniques to key points on Powell's body, helping him channel and control the massive influx of sensory input. Their shared effort paid off. The device powered down, the spatial distortion dissipated, and both ships were saved from destruction. As the immediate crisis subsided, Powell and Gia collapsed into each other's arms, exhausted but triumphant. As they caught their breath, Powell turned his attention to the aftermath of their ordeal. The radiation-exposed crew members were being stabilized, but it was clear their enhancements were temporary. The trapped Vorax ship hung motionless in space, its crew likely as shocked by the turn of events as the Harmonies. "Open a channel to the Vorax ship," Powell ordered, his voice hoarse but determined. As Zexakar's face appeared on the screen once more, Powell saw a new wariness in the alien captain's eyes. "It seems we have much to discuss, Captain Zexakar," Powell began, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps now would be a good time to consider the benefits of cooperation over conflict." As negotiations with the Vorax began, Powell felt Gia's hand slip into his. Their shared ordeal had deepened their bond, resolving their earlier conflict. Together, they faced the challenge of integrating their old enemies into the complex political landscape of the Alliance. The ancient station loomed before them, its secrets only partially revealed. As the Harmony's crew secured their groundbreaking discoveries and prepared for the journey home, Powell knew that their adventures in the nebula were far from finished. The wormhole device, the Vorax, the mysterious radiation, each presented new challenges and opportunities that would shape the future of interstellar relations in ways they had yet to fully comprehend. As the Harmony prepared for its journey back to Alliance space, Powell found himself standing at a crossroads, both professionally and personally. The ship's engines hummed to life, propelling them away from the nebula and its mysterious station. Powell watched the swirling colors fade into the distance, his mind already racing with the implications of their discoveries. Beside him, Gia's presence was a comforting constant, their shared experiences having forged a bond stronger than ever before. As they traversed the vast expanse of space, Powell immersed himself in compiling reports and preparing for the inevitable barrage of questions that awaited them. The wormhole device schematics, the ancient station's data crystals, and the unexpected alliance with the Vorax all needed to be carefully presented to Alliance leadership. Days turned into weeks, and the anticipation aboard the Harmony grew palpable. Crew members from all species worked tirelessly, their excitement evident in every task they performed. Powell observed with pride as humans, Wadi and Zeltari collaborated seamlessly, their differences fading in the face of their shared purpose. As they approached the outer boundaries of Alliance territory, the ship's long-range sensors detected a large gathering of vessels. Powell's heart raced as he realized the magnitude of their welcome party. "On screen," he ordered, his voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in his stomach. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a breathtaking sight. A fleet of ships representing every Alliance species hung in space before them. Sleek human vessels floated alongside the organic curves of Wadi ships and the crystalline structures of Zeltari crafts. And there, among them, were the unmistakable silhouettes of Vorax ships. "It seems our return has caused quite a stir," Gia observed, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Powell nodded, his eyes fixed on the impressive display. "This is it, Gia. Everything we've worked for, everything we've discovered, it all comes down to this moment." As the Harmony approached the assembled fleet, hails poured in from all sides. Representatives from every species clamored for information, their voices a cacophony of different languages and tones. Powell took a deep breath, steadying himself for the task ahead. "Let's give them something to talk about," he said, turning to Gia with a determined smile. "Ready to make history?" Gia's skin shimmered in response, her own excitement evident. "Always, Edward." Together they stepped onto the bridge, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Powell's voice rang out clear and confident as he addressed the assembled fleet. "This is Lieutenant Edward Powell of the Joint Species Task Force. On behalf of the crew of the Harmony, I thank you for this warm welcome. We bring news of great discoveries and even greater possibilities for our Alliance. I propose a series of meetings aboard our ship to share our findings and discuss their implications for all our people." As the responses flooded in, Powell felt a surge of hope. The journey that had begun in the swirling depths of a distant nebula was just the beginning. In fact, it was clear that their greatest adventure, the forging of a true interstellar community, was just beginning. Over the next few days, the Harmony became a hub of frenetic activity. Delegates from all allied species shuttled back and forth, eager to learn about the expedition's discoveries. Powell and Gia found themselves at the center of it all, their complementary skills put to the test as they navigated the complex web of interspecies, politics, and scientific inquiry. In the ship's main conference room, Powell and Gia stood side by side, facing a diverse audience of alien dignitaries. The air hummed with anticipation as they prepared to present their findings. "Esteemed representatives," Powell began, his voice clear and confident, "what we discovered in the nebula has the potential to revolutionize not just our technology, but our very understanding of the universe and our place in it." As he spoke, Gia manipulated a holographic display, bringing to life the complex schematics of the Wormhole device. The audience watched in awe as the intricate alien technology unfolded before their eyes. "The Wormhole device," Gia explained, her bioluminescence pulsing in sync with the hologram, "represents a leap forward in our ability to traverse vast distances. But more than that, it offers us a chance to bridge the gaps between our cultures, to truly come together as a united alliance." Their presentation flowed seamlessly, each picking up where the other left off. Powell's human perspective complemented Gia's Wadi insights, creating a narrative that resonated with every species present. As they spoke, Powell could see the excitement growing in the eyes of the delegates, transcending physical differences. When they finished, the room erupted in a chorus of questions and exclamations. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion now engaged in animated discussions, their shared wonder overcoming old prejudices. Amidst the commotion, Powell locked eyes with Gia. In that moment, he saw reflected in her alien features the same sense of accomplishment and hope that he felt. They had done more than just present scientific findings. They had sown the seeds of a new era of cooperation. As the delegates filed out, still buzzing with excitement, Powell turned to Gia. "I think we made quite an impression," he said, unable to keep the smile from his face. Gia's skin rippled with colors that Powell had come to recognize as joy and pride. "Indeed," she replied, "but this is only the beginning. We have much work ahead of us." Powell nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities and challenges that lay before them. The discovery of the wormhole technology was just the first step. Now came the real test, guiding the Alliance through the complex process of implementing this new technology while maintaining the delicate balance between species. As they left the conference room, Powell's comm unit chimed. It was a message from Alliance leadership requesting their presence at an emergency session to discuss the immediate implications of their discoveries. Powell exchanged a knowing look with Gia. Their journey, it seemed, was just the beginning. With renewed commitment, they set off to face the next challenge, ready to shape the future of interstellar relations together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.